What's up everybody, Jameson here with the Road Trip Angler. I wanted to share a tip with you today on kayak fishing in open water. Before we jump into this video, I want to give a quick shout out to our partner, the American Canoe Association. We've actually put a link in the description to their online course. So if you're thinking about getting into paddle sports, be sure to check that out. As we get into this tip, I want to describe what I mean by open water. What I'm talking about is when you're in big open bays, maybe you're on the inshore flats, but you're a little further from shore, or you're in a big lake. Areas where conditions can change rapidly because of weather or current or even tidal changes. You're going to be dealing with things that you might not have to deal with on small farm ponds or smaller lakes, or even in river situations where you're going to be pretty close to shore. And a lot of that prep is going to start before you even get on the water. So some of the things that you want to think about when you're going to be fishing open water and a little further away from the shore is where you're going to be putting in at, what the weather conditions are doing, and making sure that you have a way to communicate with other anglers that are out there on the water with you, and also with people that aren't on the water with you. Before I actually plan a trip to fish on a big open lake, I'm going to really look at my map and look at where I'm thinking about launching. And I'm going to think about, okay, what is the wind doing? What is the tide and current doing? Am I going to be able to safely make it back to that launch? And should I paddle into the wind or into the current so that when I want to come back, I have those things to help me? A lot of times when you're dealing with tide, it might make sense to plan your trip so that you can go out with the tide and come back in with the tide. And that's going to make it a lot easier on you when you're trying to get back to that launch location or get back to your vehicle. The other thing that I really strongly recommend doing, we call it in river fishing, is having a float plan. Now, obviously you're not floating down a river in these situations, but having a plan of this is where I'm putting in at, this is how long I'm going to be on the water approximately. Now we're anglers, we are always going to make that one last cast that lasts for 3 or 4 hours, right? But having some type of plan so that if you don't show up when you said you were going to show up, someone knows that they should probably start looking for you, or at least try to get in touch with you. I always recommend trying to go out on the water with others. It is so key to have that help and just even to have that communication. Not only does it help you dial in the fish, figure out where they are and what they're eating, because you can use different tactics and try different areas, but also just having that help in case you get into a situation where you need someone to help back you up. So when possible, especially in open water, go out with others. Have a friend or buddy system in place so that you can go out and enjoy a day. Now, I know that is not always possible. Sometimes your schedule is not going to line up with those other people, so you might be going out on the water alone. If you're going to do that, be sure to take as many safety precautions as you possibly can. Obviously, no matter what, always wear your life jacket. I strongly recommend finding one that fits you very comfortably, that fits properly, and that you're going to enjoy wearing while you're on the water. If it's one of those inflatable style that when you go into the water, it's going to either automatically inflate or rely on you to inflate it, it has to be worn anyway to be approved by the United States Coast Guard. So make sure you have that on. If you're wearing one of these style life jackets that already has that flotation in it and you don't have to rely on some mechanical thing that could fail, I even feel like you're going to be a bit safer. Plus, you can keep some things on the life jacket in case you end up going in the water. So I'm going to go through a couple of things that I like to keep on my life jacket, on my person, in case something happens, because I always plan to get wet. You never know what's going to happen. You obviously don't want to flip your kayak, but it could happen and you need to be prepared for that moment. So to start with, having a properly fitted life jacket is super key to helping you get back to your boat quickly and get back in it. But also, in the event that you get separated from your kayak, it's going to help keep you afloat and less tired as you fight that conditions or that water while you're out there. Some of the things I keep on my life jacket, I keep a knife attached to my life jacket. If you flip your kayak and you have rod leashes or paddle leashes or anchor line or anything like that on your boat, there's a chance that you could get entangled in it. So having that knife handy so that you can cut away anything that you need to is super key. Plus, you find all kinds of uses for it anyway. I also keep my pliers on there. Now that's not really relevant to fishing in open water, but it's just a convenient place to have those. If you get a hook stuck in you or something like that, you've got the pliers there. You can cut them away with the cutters. The other thing that is super important, also required, is to have some sort of sounding device. This is a simple whistle. You can get this, keep it in your life jacket pocket, even tether it to your life jacket, so that if you go in the drink and you need to sound out for a boat or one of the other anglers that's out there, you can blow that whistle when a boat comes close, or you can blow that whistle to get the attention of others that might be close enough to come help you. So having some sort of sounding device is super key, and a whistle is cheap, it's easy to attach to your life jacket, and you can keep it on your person at all times. The next thing that I strongly recommend keeping on your life jacket and on your person is some sort of communication device. Now, we all carry cell phones with us. Most of us can't be found without them, right? So having that cell phone in your life jacket, especially if you've got some sort of waterproof case or if your cell phone itself is waterproof, is super important. That way you can let people know if you're in need of help. You can stay in touch with each other while you're on the water, especially if you get separated, but you can also call home and let whoever you left that float plan with know that you're going to be running a little bit late and just check in. They can also get in touch with you. It is so important. If you go in the water and you have your cell phone and it's waterproof or it's protected from that water, you can lay on your back, you can pull it out, and you can call. A lot of these devices also, you can get different apps, Google Maps, you can use Navionics, you can get the weather, the wind. You can keep in touch with what's going on in your area and look for those warnings that might happen if the weather takes a turn. But there are situations where you might not have cell service. So you really need to think about where you're going and whether or not you're going to have cell service. And if you don't, get a plan. Different kinds of radios work well, but when you're fishing, especially coastal waters, a VHF radio can be super important. I always keep a pair. That way, if I am fishing with a buddy that doesn't have one, I can actually loan him one of my VHF radios. We can stay in touch with each other, but also there is a weather band on these, and you can also communicate with the Coast Guard. And they're able to pick these things up from miles and miles away. So if you're fishing in coastal regions, especially, a VHF radio can be super key and important because you may not have cell phone service, and this will keep you in touch with each other quickly and easily, but you can also reach out for help if you need it. A lot of these will float and they're waterproof. So a handheld VHF is a cheap way to have some insurance when it comes to communication out on the water. Cool. If the VHF radio is what you decide to carry on the water for communication, you should really familiarize yourself with the different channels and their uses, because there's a lot of different channels on these radios, and actually the public is only supposed to use a certain number of those channels as far as to communicate with each other. But the really important channels are channel 16 and then also channel 9. Channel 16 is the channel that the U.S. Coast Guard monitors. So if you're in an emergency situation and you need to contact the Coast Guard, channel 16 is going to be your channel. Channel 9 is your weather band, and that's going to keep you up to date. If you don't have cell phone service and you can't check the weather on your phone, you can turn to channel 9 and it's going to give you that local weather report in coastal areas. Now, we're not in a coastal area, so these channels are pretty dead here in the mountains of North Carolina, but if you're in a coastal area or around a big lake, you'll probably be able to utilize channel 16 and channel 9 for those two things. In addition to wearing your life jacket and having those different things in place that you carry with you, you should also dress appropriately to plan to get wet as well. If the water is cold or the air temp is cold as well, then you really should think about wearing maybe a dry suit or something to keep you dry if you do go in the water. Again, you're in open water. Things can happen and you can end up wet or in the water. So you need to be prepared for that and wear the right clothing that will either quickly dry or will keep you warm if that water temp and air temp is cold enough that you should be looking to do that. I have a full video actually on what to wear while kayak fishing, so I'll post a link to that in the description, and I won't get into that too much in this video, but dress to get wet. It is super important. The other thing when we're talking about dressing to get wet, you should also plan to get wet. We have a video on the channel as well that talks about how to right your kayak and get yourself back in it, and I strongly recommend you watch that video and you go out and practice that when conditions are safe to do so, wearing the proper gear, so that if something does go wrong and happens when you're out on some open water, potentially even by yourself, you know what to do and you're not gonna panic. You're able to get that kayak back upright, get in it, and maybe even get the water out of that boat in order to get yourself safe and secure and back home to your loved ones. Now, moving on from all that stuff that's kind of pre-planning, you know, what you're wearing, your life jacket, the things you should have on your life jacket, your float plan, and looking at the weather, you're now out on the water, and sometimes things happen. There's a rogue thunderstorm, the tide doesn't do what you think it's supposed to do based on the charts and whatnot, and you just find yourself in a struggle to get maybe back to where that ramp is. Or the waves kick up and now you're facing a lot rougher conditions than you planned for. There's some things you can do that will help. Number one, if the wind is blowing directly at you or you have waves hitting your kayak, anytime that you can go either with the waves or straight into the waves, perpendicular to the waves, either with them or straight into them, that's going to be a much easier situation for you. Yes, you may take water over the bow, but you lower that risk of actually flipping your kayak. Even if you have to kind of go into them at an angle to get back to your launch location. Sometimes that may mean that you're not able to make a straight line back to where your car or your vehicle is or where you are planning to take out at. You may have to go kind of out and around. So think about it like this. You may have to make a dog leg to get back and make a longer distance trip where you either go to a shoreline that's more protected, you go down that protected shoreline before you then make your cross back over to the car. It's not always the easiest thing to do to make that straight line, you know, back to that launch. You may need to go with the wind or at an angle a little bit until you get far enough past the launch that you can turn around and come directly in to those crashing waves or vice versa. So just keep an eye on what the conditions are, the direction of the waves, the direction of the wind or the current, and try to plan accordingly. And remember, it's not always the best idea to just make a straight beeline back to that vehicle or to that launch location. The last thing I would say, a lot of the kayaks today, especially ones designed specifically for fishing, have high and low seat positions. When you're in open water and those conditions kick up, get that seat position as low as you can, get your center of gravity low in that boat, and you're gonna stay a lot safer and more stable out there. In most cases, when you're in big open water and you're not close to shore and calmer water, you're not gonna be standing up in the kayak anyway. So stay low, keep your center of gravity low, and when you're going to reach into the back of the boat or whatever, you can actually spin and put your feet in the water and keep your center of gravity over the boat, and you're not really leaning your head out and whatnot. So keeping your center of gravity low is going to make the boat a lot more stable, and you're going to be safer in that open water. The other thing that's super key when you're out in open water is having some form of navigation. Whether it's a compass, that is probably the least I would recommend having. Your cell phone with some maps on it, or if you can, have your fish finder graph with the GPS and maps on that. This way you can keep an eye on where you launch from, how far you're getting away from that area, and you can keep an idea of how much time or effort it's going to take to get back to that area, because a lot of times it will also measure your speed. But having that function of being able to navigate, especially in big open water where you may be getting far enough from land or the shore that things start to not look right or you don't recognize exactly where you're at, is super important, especially when you're fishing new water and open water. So some form of navigation, whether it's just a cell phone, it's your map on your graph, or you at least have a compass and you know how to use it and read it and get back out there another time. If you enjoyed this content, be sure to subscribe. Stay safe out there, wear your life jacket, and as always, thanks for watching. This is one of the biggest striper I've ever caught.